Hello, Sara Sabin, transformational leadership and team coach here in the Leading in the Modern Way video interview series. And I am really excited to have with me here today Jared Coseglia, who is the founder and CEO of True Staffing Partners. Jared, welcome. And would you like to briefly introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yes, thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm Jared. As you said, am the founder and CEO of True Staffing Partners. We specialize in three core verticals: e-discovery, data privacy and protection, and cybersecurity. We staff up and down those verticals from the C-suite all the way down to the entry level. We handle full-time direct hire placement, retained search, contract to hire, fractional. If there's a way to get talent working for your organization, we provide the resources to do so. I just crossed the threshold of 4,000 people in jobs over the last 24 years. My organization, True, is turning 13 this year in 2023, and we have made the Inc. 5,000 list of fastest growing American companies 4 out of the last 7 years, with the last 2 years, 21 and 22, placing back to back. So we're very excited about our growth, and I'm excited to be here with you today, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. And congratulations on all of those impressive accolades there.
Thank you.
And I'd love to know, you cover such a broad range of levels, industries within True. How did you get to that point? Did you start in a particular niche and then keep adding to it? Or did you decide to go broad to start with?
Well, we feel like we're very niche, actually, and we do spill into other areas like information governance, AI, and a couple other up-and-coming emerging disciplines that will likely be bolstered to our core disciplines. But I was a theater director. I went to NYU undergrad to be an actor, realized pretty quickly that my gift was uniting and harmonizing people and process and technology on the stage, and had a pretty unlucrative but busy theater career for the first 13 years I was out of school, but I needed to make money. And so I had done nurse staffing with someone when I was in college, which I absolutely hated. And it just wasn't for me, for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is the way you would recruit nurses in the late 90s was you'd send a fax blast at 2 a.m. to a hospital, hoping that the night shift nurse would be interested in a day shift opportunity for more money that was closer to their home. Yeah, really, intelligent work. Nurses are lovely people, but I didn't enjoy recruiting them. So I got out of that business. And then the same person I worked for in college had sent me an email in 2002 asking me if I'd be interested in helping him start an e-discovery business. And I said, well, if you'll pay me $20, I was at the time writing a play with a friend of mine in the French Quarter of New Orleans, kind of living hand to mouth, and came back to New York City and started working for him. And we wound up placing Brian Stemple, who's sort of a legend in the e-discovery industry, as the global director of litigation support and e-discovery at Kirkland & Ellis, which is one of the most famous law firms in the world. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. And I realized very quickly, this is before I started True, that the community in e-discovery was embracing my leadership in a way that the theater community was not. I left that company around 2009, started True in 2010, was still doing theater, had a play that was being produced at the Goodspeed Opera House that I had written and directed, and the composer lyricist of that show and a couple other shows I had written is now my CFO and COO, who's a brilliant and the most logical person. His day job was writing LSAT training for the Princeton Review, had the highest ranked listened to podcast in the world for LSAT training. It had a lot of synergies with our business in legal technology. And we were working in Connecticut, and they wanted to replace me as the director of the show that I had written because they just didn't feel that a 29-year-old had the capacity for the human condition that somebody twice my age would. At that same week that I was getting that really crushing news, the CIO of Baker Hostetler, one of my mentors now, a man by the name of Bob Craig, who's since retired, wound up saying, hey, we landed all this SIPC litigation, and we're going to be trying to claw back $60 billion in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. And I need to build an e-discovery department at the firm. And I met with him, and he said, I just think you're the perfect guy to do it and harmonize all of our legal tech and people process. And I staffed them up, never looked back, quit theater. And that was the beginning of the beginning for me in e-discovery. When Sony got hacked in late 13, early 14, I said, this is going to be huge. Cybersecurity is going to be a massive growth area. It's now moved from corporate consciousness into social consciousness, and is something that all of us feel like affects us. And I was kind of right, but I was also a little late to the game. But what I wasn't late to the game for was data privacy. And so we do a lot of cybersecurity, but we are deeply embedded in the data privacy community. And quickly, those three became our pillars of expertise. And so, yeah, we started in e-discovery. It was a logical next move to move into cyber and to move into data privacy because they're all interconnected. We're dealing with laws, we're dealing with regulatory environments, we're dealing with data, and we're dealing with the people that wield all of those things and a lot more. And those communities have really embraced our style of representation, which does pull from my theater background to some degree in the way that we prepare our candidates and our clients to go out and hire or look for work.
That's such an interesting journey. And, you know, that theatre background explains the waistcoat.
I do like to put on a show.
Which, for anyone listening, I was very excited to see someone in a waistcoat. But seriously. So just to, you know, summarize some of the things you said, you've basically followed the trail of breadcrumbs, so to speak. So you followed the things that you were good at, and that was to do with people and harmonizing people and being able to see where they fit. You followed the industry leads and saw how things were connected, and you built a business around that. And I think, you know, when you are building something at the start, you know, you don't dictate what the market wants. You see what the market wants, you assess the trends and where things are going, and you work around that, which is what I'm hearing that you did.
I would say that's accurate. I would just add to that part of it is finding your tribe and finding a community that really values your perspective and the work that you bring to their lives. And I just wasn't finding that in theater. I wasn't feeling valued. And I didn't want to spend the next 40 years proving that value only to become old enough to have earned it. And at a very young age, I mean, I was in my late 20s, early 20s when I got into e-discovery, and late 20s when I started my own company. That community really trusted me, which is why I named my company what we did, right? True Staffing Partners. The first 5 letters of our company, if you cram it all together, is TRUST. And that's really our only product, right? People trust us. People trust us with their company's infrastructure from a human capital perspective, and people trust us with their careers. And I've built a business and you know, wealth based on that trust. So it's very sacred to us, and I just wasn't getting that trust in the other world. So you got to find your tribe too.
100% agree with that. And I think it's interesting that you've literally baked trust into the company name. And it's interesting because at this point I've spoken to the leaders of a few recruitment businesses, and what I saw is their differentiators were based around this concept of trust and really building relationships and doing what is best for the client, which makes a company stand out in an industry that is seen as perhaps a little sharky, in inverted commas.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think agents get a good and a bad rap from the TV and movies, right? I mean, I like to think of us more as a Jerry Maguire kind of firm as opposed to an Ari Gold kind of firm. If you watch Entourage or have seen the movie Jerry Maguire, those are probably the two most famous fictional talent agents that have been portrayed on the screen. And you know, part of that is because we're very mission driven here. But to your point about trust, it's not just about trust with individuals, it's about trust with that community. And the way I've found to build trust with the community is in providing them with statistical analysis about what's happening in that community from a job market perspective. And despite having quite a warm storyteller-like approach based on my theater experience, we blend that with a pretty hardcore statistical analysis of what are the things happening in the industry that you can lean into, whether you're a hiring manager or a job seeker, and count on when it comes from true, and trust when the data comes from true about this is what's going on. This is where the salary ranges are. This is how long the speed of hire is to hire somebody. This is where we see inflection points in opportunity. Here's what role definitions do look like based on what's actually happening in the marketplace. And we've differentiated ourselves in our vertical by being the global go-to for not only what we get paid to do, which is put people in jobs, but for the analysis broadly that we bring to the industry community to better it.
Thought leadership, no doubt, presented in a theatrical way.
Yeah, I don't like the word thought leadership because it sounds like an opinion. What we're bringing is facts. What we're bringing is statistical analysis of data points. And we're very blessed in that we have the data. Data stewardship is a core principle of our culture here. And we're very fortunate to have all the data to be able to say, hey, listen, we're placing hundreds and hundreds of people every year in these industries. And here's what people are actually paying. They might be advertising this, but here's actually what's happening day to day at the point of hire, right? We don't do salary surveys. I don't need to. We have hundreds of people a week that we talk to in all these different industries across all the different verticals. So we know what people are making because they tell us. What's more interesting is what are people actually paying when it's time for them to leave that job and take another, and what do those trends look like from a variety of different perspectives?
Yeah, I think the word thought leadership, to explain how I see it, is being visible, talking about what your expertise is, not necessarily expressing opinion.
I wish everybody had that same assumption.
Definition. You know, and I think people have such varying definitions of the same word. Some people find the word inspirational very offensive for some reason. I did come across someone offensive. So yeah, it's always good to define words. And on that note, I would love you to define for me what your view of the word leadership is. So how do you define strong leadership, and how do you see it impacting the growth of True Staffing Partners?
Yeah, you know, I'll answer it in a very specific way to me. It's not how everyone defines leadership, but for me, it's what are the aspects that you want your brand and your employees to emulate. And finding consistency amongst that definition allows you to have consistency in the kind of service that you deliver and the kind of people that you hire to deliver that service. So when I look towards how I define myself as a leader, I look to assimilate that with how I define the company culture. And it changes. It's not a static thing, but it is something that if it's not emulated, then what value does it really have?
So you see leadership of the company as being tied up with the kind of culture that you are trying to integrate within the company. Is that correct?
1,000%.
Okay. So how would you define leadership separate from the company, out of interest?
I think leadership is making choices and influencing others to embrace those choices as their own. That's how I look at leadership. It's how I was taught how to be a good theater director, right? And I had some great mentors there. And the things I've emulated that I've learned from them are really cornerstone that are industry agnostic, right? You think of it this way. How do you get an actor to give the performance of a lifetime? How do you get them to make choices that are the best and most interesting emotional realities for a character on stage? And how does that translate into getting people to make choices about their career that are the best, healthiest, wealthiest choices for them, both short and long term? And that really is about influence, right? Influence, expertise.
How do you influence people? Are there specific things that you do?
Consistency is important, right? Inconsistency is the death of influence. Leading by example, trying very hard to practice what I preach at all times, being sure that people that work with me and for me are heard, and showing them that I can be influenced. Influence is a secular experience. Surrounding myself with the right people, not people who will be influenced, but people who can take direction, but also can give honest and transparent feedback. And that loop of communication allows us to influence a community.
Yes, the best coaches and a lot of leaders are skilled at coaching are also coachable as well.
It better be.
Yeah, it better be, not always the case, but there you go. So
well, look, I'm not Elon Musk, right? I don't I don't have billions and billions of dollars to say it doesn't matter. I'll just go buy people that I can influence. I'm not saying that's what he does, but I'm saying that that kind of, status allows you to influence on a level that, quite frankly, I don't comprehend. But we're a boutique staffing agency, and so yeah, it matters that you surround yourself with the right people and that they're as much heard as they are hearing what you say.
Yeah, I think, there are different types of leadership, and Elon Musk is a very specific type of leadership. He doesn't need to think about some of the other things that a lot of leaders do have to think about in order to motivate and engage their employees, because as a figure, he alone is inspirational and you either love him or you hate him. But I think for let's call it, for the normal entrepreneur, having a perspective that looks like, okay, I have a mission, I'm getting other people to enlist into that mission. You need to put a little bit more effort into doing that.
Well, first you have to have a clearly defined mission, which I think a lot of people don't, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into business because they think they're good at something, or they think there's opportunity there, or they want to make money, or they did this in a previous job and think they can do it better than the people they learned it from. And that, to me, is not entrepreneurship. That's, employment.
Yes. I mean, you can create a business which is basically just taking what you were doing in a corporate environment and putting it over there. Most entrepreneurs, if they are building a conscious culture, or if they're building a high performance culture, need that mission to center people around. And that mission goes beyond just making money.
Yes. And I think you also have to separate mission from culture. Often mission doesn't change, but for me, culture often does.
So mission is part, and let's go into definitions again. Mission is part of forming a culture, but obviously there are other elements that go into a culture. So I'd love you to tell me a little bit more about the kind of culture that you have, and you've referred to it a few times that it evolves. How do you look at the evolution of your culture?
Well, look, culture is the feeling that your company has or wants to have, both internally and externally. And I think with a lot of companies, you could go and ask their employees, tell me about the culture, and you might ask 100 people and get 100 different answers. I do an exercise with my company a couple times a year. Sometimes it's quarterly, but this year I think we've done it twice. And I ask everybody we're on a team Zoom, take a piece of paper, write it down in front of you so we can all see it so that it doesn't change, lock it in, Family Feud style. Mm-hmm. 3 things that define our culture. What are the 3 things? And I really encourage people to have it try to be one word or one adjective or a very short phrase, because when culture becomes this sentence, it loses its impact opportunity and it becomes too complicated. And so we had everybody at the company do this a couple months ago. What's amazing is there are certain things that came up that were the same almost for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And then there was one that just didn't come up at all that to me was so important to company culture. And it became this opportunity for me to reinforce things that everyone was feeling, mm-hmm. and redirect things that people were either de-emphasizing or hadn't thought of as being important, and really drive that home that this is core to our culture. So for the moment here at True, we define our culture in 3 words: growth, kindness, mm-hmm. and transparency. And if we can just do that, if we could just focus on things here feel transparent, right? We have a lot of transparency into the business for our employees. We give a lot of transparency into our business and what's happening externally to our customers and candidates so that they know what's happening. We try to treat everyone internally with kindness. We try to represent everyone with kindness. But those were the 2 everybody talked about. Nobody said growth on my team. And I had to reinforce it. I'm like, guys, we're not the most profitable American company 4 out of the last 7 years. We're the fastest growing, right? We are growing. Top line is just as important to me as bottom line, sometimes more important. And you don't hear that from a lot of leaders, in my opinion, certainly not once they become publicly traded companies where bottom line and stakeholders and investors or their private equity or venture capital back kind of supersedes other things. But for me, expanding our reach is really important because I want the company to grow. I want all my employees to have personal growth tracks. I want the people who we place into jobs to feel like they've got growth tracks and that working with us has helped them grow as professionals, if only in how they approach their profession, much less approach their job search. So once we kind of define these core things, everything centers around that. And I say, is what we're doing meeting one of those 3 criteria, or all of those criteria? Are the time, effort, energy that we're putting forth into our daily jobs leading to growth, transparency, and kindness? And if they're not, I ask the employees to say, stop. Let's recalibrate. Let's really think about, is this initiative, is this investment, is this use of our time, is this customer the right use of our time, the right customer for us to be working with, if they're not driving us towards one of these 3 cultural icons?
Thank you for going into detail on that. And really interestingly, in terms of definition, so what I would call that process is defining the values that underpin the culture. And I love what you've said about how you actively and regularly get your employees involved in that process, because I have talked to leaders and worked with leaders that set them once, talk about them once, and then when they revisit it, they wonder why no one remembers what the values actually are. They need to be constantly reinforced, and they need to be baked into the behaviors, and that includes decision making of an organization for them to be of value, if you'll pardon the pun, for them to be of value and to maintain that culture. And that regular review also allows for identifying areas of weakness, so where you're not doing so well that you need to be doing better. So obviously you talked about growth there.
Yeah, it's also an opportunity for them to participate in the definition, right? I mean, if no one
Exactly.
had said all three things that I had put on my piece of paper, like what a disconnect I'd have from my employees.
Mm,
Fortunately, that wasn't the case. But I will say that after we went through this exercise, about a month later, we did a slight reorganization of the infrastructure from a human capital perspective of my organization, as a result of trying to focus us more on growth.
mm,
We grew a lot in 2021 and 22 coming out of the pandemic, as a lot of staffing companies did. And 2023 has been a very different year, both
mm,
economically and in terms of our ability to grow. And we're facing different obstacles, quite frankly, obstacles that no one in the staffing industry has ever had to face before, like working from home and a return to office. I mean, these are things that are new obstacles to negotiate that have never existed before. They perforate every industry vertical except for maybe construction or waiting tables and things like that. But if you're in corporate America, I mean, these are real challenges that require a lot of leadership from external partners to help navigate in order to attract and retain employees. And it's been a real inhibitor to growth, I think, for everyone.
100%. So, final question, Jared. If you could go back in time and talk to your 20-year-old self, what one piece of advice would you give to him?
Oh man. I mean, I would have told my 20-year-old self to be relentlessly uncompromising in the theater business. I was too concerned about making long-term connections and did not focus enough on standing up for the art
Mhm.
and being completely unrelentingly focused on that above all else. But I would tell myself that also, whatever path you think that you're destined for is probably not what's going to happen. So have faith that you will make the right decisions about what paths to follow that bring you joy. And don't have remorse over making decisions that didn't match up with what you thought your destiny would be.
Mm,
I beat
I-
myself up a lot when I was younger that I
mm,
was walking away from something. And as I say to all the people that we represent, when you're on an interview, never talk about what you're walking away from, always talk about what you're walking towards. And I wish I had embraced that a little bit more because it
mm.
served me well.
Yeah, I think at the end of it all, we only regret the things that we didn't do because we were too scared to move. But I love the looking forward rather than looking back mantra there. So thank you so much, Jared. I've really
Pleasure.
enjoyed this conversation today.
Ditto. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
So, to my listeners, I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation as well. If you would like to be part of the Leading in the Modern Way interview series, please do reach out to me. Bye for now.